There's something fascinating about the women men remember instantly. It's not always beauty, it's not always what she's wearing, and it's definitely not about trying too hard to impress. Sometimes a man can meet a woman for less than 60 seconds and already feel like there's something different about her, something rare, something that makes him stop and think, she's not like everyone else. Because the truth is, men may notice looks first, but they decide who feels unforgettable based on habits, small behaviors, quiet signals, the way you carry yourself, the energy you bring into a room. And certain classy habits create that effect almost instantly, making a man not just attracted to you, but seriously imagine you as someone he could build a life with. Here are 5 powerful habits that create that impact. There's a powerful difference between a woman who tries to be noticed and a woman who naturally becomes impossible to ignore. Most people assume attraction is about being the loudest person in the room, wearing the boldest outfit, or constantly making sure all eyes are on them. But the women who leave the deepest impression rarely do any of that. In fact, what makes them stand out is often the exact opposite. It's the calmness in how they carry themselves. It's the confidence in their silence. It's the quiet certainty that says, I don't need to compete for attention, because I already know who I am. When a woman walks into a room with that kind of energy, people feel it instantly. She isn't scanning the room for approval. She isn't changing her personality to fit whoever she's around. She isn't trying to impress every person she meets. Instead, she moves with ease. She's comfortable in her own skin. She speaks when she has something meaningful to say, not because silence makes her uncomfortable. And that alone makes people lean in. A lot of women unknowingly give away their power by constantly trying to be liked. They laugh a little too hard at jokes they don't even find funny. They over-explain themselves. They fill every silence because they're afraid being quiet will make them seem boring. They seek reassurance through attention, compliments, and validation. But the truth is, when you constantly chase attention, you often communicate insecurity even if you don't mean to. And people can feel that energy faster than you realize. A classy woman understands something different. She knows that attention is cheap, but respect is earned. She knows that being noticed is easy, but being remembered takes something deeper. So instead of trying to control how others see her, she focuses on how she feels about herself. And that inner confidence changes everything about how she shows up. When she speaks, there's intention behind her words. She doesn't interrupt just to prove she's interesting. She listens, she observes, she pays attention to people. And because she's not constantly waiting for her turn to talk, people naturally feel drawn to her presence. They feel seen around her, and that creates a kind of connection that loudness never can. Men especially notice this. Because in a world where so many people are trying to be chosen, a woman who acts like she's already chosen herself feels rare. She doesn't need to post for validation. She doesn't need to flirt with every man in the room to feel attractive. She doesn't need to perform confidence, because confidence has become part of her identity. And what makes this even more powerful is that it's not arrogance. Arrogance says, look at me. Real confidence says, I know my worth whether you notice me or not. That energy is magnetic because it feels authentic. It creates curiosity. It makes people want to know more. A woman like this doesn't rush her words. She doesn't fidget because silence appears. She doesn't panic when she's not the center of attention. She knows that presence isn't about volume. It's about energy. It's about how people feel when you're around them. And when someone carries themselves with genuine self-respect, emotional stability, and quiet confidence, they don't need to force attention. Attention finds them. One of the fastest ways a man begins to see a woman differently is not through how she looks, how she dresses, or even how charming she is in conversation. It's in the small moments that most people overlook. It's in the way she treats people who can do absolutely nothing for her. The waiter taking her order, the driver stuck in traffic, the cashier who accidentally makes a mistake, the friend who's having a difficult day. These moments reveal something far deeper than that attraction ever could. They reveal character. And character is what makes someone unforgettable. A woman who treats everyone with genuine respect carries a kind of elegance that goes beyond appearance. She doesn't switch personalities depending on who she's around. She doesn't become warm when someone is important and cold when someone isn't. Her kindness isn't strategic. It isn't something she turns on when she wants to impress. It's part of who she is, and that consistency is incredibly powerful. A man notices this more than most women realize. He watches how you speak when no one seems to be paying attention. He notices your tone when something doesn't go your way. He notices whether you handle frustration with maturity or whether small inconveniences completely change your energy. Because in those moments, he's not just seeing how you treat others, he's imagining how you might treat him in difficult seasons, how you might treat his family, his friends, and one day, possibly, his children. Many people can create attraction in the beginning. They can be playful, exciting, flirty, and fun to be around. But long-term connection is built on something deeper than chemistry. It's built on trust, emotional safety, and the feeling that the person beside you has a good heart. And one of the clearest ways to communicate that is through how you treat people when there's nothing to gain. A classy woman understands that respect doesn't cost anything, but it reveals everything. She says, thank you. She makes eye contact. She listens when people speak. She doesn't talk down to others because of their job, status, or background. She doesn't use sarcasm to embarrass people. She doesn't need to make others feel small in order to feel powerful. Instead, her strength shows up in her ability to make people feel seen, heard, and valued. There's something incredibly feminine and deeply attractive about a woman who can walk into any environment and bring warmth with her. Not because she's trying to be liked by everyone, but because kindness has become natural to her. She understands that how you make people feel often stays with them longer than anything you say, and men pay attention to this because it speaks volumes about emotional maturity. Anyone can be kind when life is easy. Anyone can smile when things are going their way, but true character shows up in pressure, when the service is slow, when plans change, when mistakes happen. Does she react with grace, or does frustration take over? Does she stay grounded? Or does she become disrespectful the moment things feel inconvenient? A woman who can remain respectful, calm, and emotionally balanced in those moments creates something much stronger than attraction. She creates admiration. And admiration is what makes a man begin to picture a future, because beauty may capture attention. But character is what creates lasting desire. There's something incredibly attractive about a woman who already has a life she genuinely loves. Not because her life has to be perfect, not because everything always goes her way, and not because she never has difficult days, but because there's a sense that her happiness isn't sitting in someone else's hands. She's not waiting for a relationship to finally feel complete. She's not hoping that one person's attention will suddenly make her feel valuable. She's already building a life that feels meaningful to her, and that energy changes everything about how people see her. A woman like this moves differently. When she talks about her life, there's passion in her voice. She has interests that excite her, goals that challenge her, friendships that matter to her, and routines that keep her connected to herself. She doesn't spend every moment checking her phone, wondering why someone hasn't texted back yet. She's not rearranging her entire schedule every time a man gives her attention. Her life has structure. It has purpose. And because of that, her attention feels valuable. Many women don't realize how much their energy changes when they make dating the center of their world. When every conversation becomes about one person, when every mood depends on whether someone texts, calls, or gives attention, it creates emotional dependence. And even if you never say it out loud, people can feel when your happiness is attached to their approval. It creates pressure. It creates imbalance. And it often pushes away the very connection you want. But a woman who has her own life creates something completely different. She brings freedom into a connection. She brings curiosity. She brings depth. Because when a man talks to her, he doesn't feel like he's meeting someone who needs to be rescued. He feels like he's meeting someone who already knows how to create joy for herself. And that's incredibly magnetic. She might be working toward a career that excites her. She might be building a business, learning new skills, exploring creative passions, spending quality time with people she loves, or investing in her personal growth. Whatever it is, she has something in her life that makes her eyes light up. And that passion becomes part of her attractiveness, because passion is contagious. People are naturally drawn to those who feel alive. Men especially notice this because it shifts the entire dynamic. Instead of feeling like they're being chased, they feel like they're being invited into something valuable. Instead of feeling responsible for creating all of her happiness, they feel inspired by the life she's already building. And that creates a healthier kind of attraction, one built on admiration instead of emotional dependency. A woman who loves her own life also tends to have stronger boundaries. She doesn't tolerate inconsistency just because she's afraid of being alone. She doesn't settle for mixed signals because she knows loneliness is never a reason to lower standards. She understands that being single is not a punishment. It's simply a season of growth, discovery, and becoming. And because she's not desperate for connection, she makes better decisions about who gets access to her time, energy, and heart. That confidence creates mystery. It creates respect. It makes people wonder what else exists beneath the surface. Because when someone sees a woman who is genuinely fulfilled, emotionally grounded, and deeply connected to her own purpose, they don't just see beauty, see substance, ambition, and a life worth becoming part of, one of the rarest qualities a woman can have, and one of the fastest ways a man begins to see her as someone different, is her ability to express emotions without creating unnecessary drama. This doesn't mean she never feels hurt. It doesn't mean she never gets disappointed, frustrated, or emotional. In fact, emotional depth can be incredibly attractive. What makes the difference is how she handles those emotions. Does she use them to communicate and connect, or does she use them to punish, control, or create chaos when things don't go her way? A classy woman understands that having emotions is not weakness. She doesn't pretend everything is fine when it isn't. She doesn't bottle things up until resentment quietly builds inside her. And she doesn't believe that staying silent makes her more lovable. She knows her feelings matter. She knows her voice matters. But she also understands that the way you communicate pain often determines whether it brings two people closer or pushes them further apart. Many people, when hurt, react before they think. They send angry messages they later regret. They become passive-aggressive. They give silent treatment. They post things online, hoping the other person will notice. They create emotional tests instead of honest conversations. And while those reactions may come from pain, they often create confusion instead of connection. They turn a simple misunderstanding into emotional distance. A woman with emotional maturity handles things differently. When something bothers her, she doesn't explode just to be heard. She doesn't attack someone's character because she feels misunderstood. She takes a moment to understand what she's feeling, and then she communicates with clarity. She might say, "That really hurt me," instead of turning it into blame. She might ask for understanding instead of starting an argument. She expresses herself without trying to make the other person feel small. This kind of emotional intelligence is incredibly powerful because it creates safety. And safety is one of the most attractive qualities in any long-term relationship. A man may enjoy excitement, passion, and chemistry in the beginning, but when he starts thinking about building a life with someone, he pays close attention to how conflict is handled. Because relationships are not built in perfect moments. They're built in difficult conversations, stressful situations, misunderstandings, and emotional pressure. When he sees a woman who can stay grounded in those moments, who can communicate honestly without becoming destructive, it creates deep respect. He starts to feel that this is someone he can actually build with, someone who won't turn every disagreement into emotional warfare, someone who can bring calm even when emotions are high. And that doesn't mean she accepts bad behavior. Emotional maturity is not about being passive or letting people walk all over you. A classy woman still has boundaries. She still speaks up when something doesn't feel right. She still walks away from disrespect. But she does it with strength, not chaos. She doesn't scream to prove a point. She doesn't beg someone to understand her worth. She simply communicates clearly, stands by her standards, and lets her actions speak when words no longer do. That kind of emotional control is rare because most people react from wounds instead of awareness. But when a woman can feel deeply, speak honestly, and remain composed even in difficult moments, she creates an energy that feels peaceful, mature, and deeply unforgettable. One of the most powerful habits that instantly changes how a man sees a woman is her ability to make him feel respected without ever trying to control him. This is where true feminine strength often gets misunderstood. Many people think attraction is built through games, emotional tests, mixed signals, or constantly making someone prove themselves. They believe power comes from keeping a man confused, making him chase endlessly, or creating emotional distance so he feels insecure enough to stay interested. But real connection doesn't grow in confusion. Real connection grows in respect. A classy woman understands that if someone genuinely values you, you do not need to manipulate them into showing it. You do not need to create drama to hold their attention. You do not need to constantly test their feelings or make them jump through emotional hoops just to feel chosen. Instead, she leads with self-respect, emotional intelligence, and clear standards. She allows a man to show her who he is through his actions, and she pays attention rather than trying to force a certain outcome. This changes everything about her energy. She's not chasing. She's not overanalyzing every message. She's not trying to control when he calls, who he talks to, where he goes, or how quickly he responds. Not because she doesn't care, but because she understands that control never creates loyalty. It only creates pressure, resistance, and eventually distance. Instead of trying to control a man's choices, she focuses on her own choices. She decides what behavior aligns with her standards. She decides what kind of communication feels healthy. She decides what kind of effort she's willing to accept. And if someone consistently falls below that standard, she doesn't argue endlessly, beg for change, or try to force them into becoming who she wants. She simply steps back, quietly, confidently, without losing her dignity. That kind of energy is incredibly powerful because it shows emotional security. It tells a man that she is not driven by fear of abandonment, fear of being alone, or fear of losing attention. She knows her worth, and because she knows it, she doesn't need to control people to feel safe. She understands that the right person will not need to be manipulated into consistency. The right person will naturally want to show up. Men feel this immediately. When a woman respects his individuality, his space, his purpose, and his freedom while still maintaining her own boundaries, it creates trust. He doesn't feel like he's being managed. He doesn't feel like he's constantly being tested. He feels seen, respected, and accepted for who he is. And in return, that often makes him want to step up even more. A woman like this doesn't compete for attention. She doesn't chase reassurance every time there's silence. She doesn't demand proof every time insecurity appears. She observes patterns. She listens to actions, she notices effort, and then she decides whether someone deserves deeper access to her life. That's where her real power lives, not in controlling outcomes, not in forcing feelings, not in trying to make someone stay, but in knowing that her value remains the same whether someone chooses to rise to meet her standards or not. And that quiet certainty creates a kind of attraction that feels mature, calming, and impossible to ignore.